connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Clay Today is a multimedia publication offering Clay County residents information on news, sports, business, and community updates. More information and details at claytodayonline.com, Clay Today 904 on Instagram, and Clay Today Newspaper on Facebook.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning and welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, chemical pollution in Brunswick residents' blood prompts a 5-year federal investigation. We asked two participants what the community hopes to learn as it goes forward. Then, a decade of the Jessie. We talk about how the nonprofit workspace has become a beacon of Jacksonville arts and architecture, and a place to swap, shop, and create. We'll tell you how you can check out the Art Cart Mart this Sunday in 5 Points. Join the conversation. Give us a call on air at 904-549-2937 or head to firstcoastconnect.org to find all the ways to connect with us. Stick around. We'll be back right after the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump says there will be a meeting tomorrow in Qatar. Writing online this morning, Trump said the meeting was at Iran's request. The possibility of a meeting between the U.S. and Iran seemed shaky this weekend. That's as Iran fired at two neighboring Gulf nations and on two ships in the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. struck sites in Iran. An aftershock has rattled Venezuela today, days after double earthquakes killed over 1,400 people. Tens of thousands of others are missing. There's not enough heavy equipment to lift tons of rubble to help rescuers search for trapped people. NPR's Ada Peralta is in Venezuela's capital, Caracas, and says there's not enough aid from the government.
There's a lot of anger and a lot of resignation, and you see that in that people are walking through half-collapsed buildings trying to take couches out and their couches out, their refrigerators out of these buildings, knowing that it could collapse at any minute, but they feel like they're not going to get any help, so they have to get what they can out of these buildings.
NPR's Ada Peralta reporting. In the U.S., the National Weather Service says more than 60 million people are under heat cautions today. From member station WDET, Quinn Kleinfelter reports a massive heat dome will blister much of the central and eastern U.S. this week.
Forecasters say high pressure will trap extreme heat under a dome of air, causing temperatures to soar into the mid to upper 90s at least. Add in the humidity and it will feel like it's well above 100. National Weather Service meteorologist Andrew Arnold says it will affect states from Michigan to Maryland.
So the center of the heat dome is going to settle right over the Ohio Valley. For the most part, the overall ridge itself is covering a good portion of central and eastern America.
Arnold says it will be so hot it will stay hot even during the evening hours. For NPR News, I'm Quinn Kleinfelter in Detroit.
To celebrate America's 250th birthday, this year's July 4th fireworks show in Washington, D.C. will be supersized. NPR's Bill Chappell reports it'll use about 851,000 fireworks, enough to set a new Guinness World Record.
This year's fireworks show on the National Mall will stretch beyond the mall.
There are actually 10 firing locations.
That's Pyrotechnico CEO Stephen Vital, whose company is putting on the big show. Some fireworks will be launched from barges in the Potomac River. The show will last 40 minutes, more than twice as long as usual, and it will start later, around 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Vital says he's using fireworks from all over.
We've sourced product from around the world to make this special and unique, particularly some great products out of Spain and Italy.
He says he wants to create memories of a beautiful show that will last a generation. Bill Chappell, NPR News.
And you're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. St. Augustine is launching its annual tree canopy enhancement program, and local homeowners can apply to help beautify the city. Starting Wednesday, residents can request a tree from a list of 9 available species that include live oak and East Palatka holly. Applications are due in by the end of August, and tree recipients will be selected in September. Crews will begin planting trees in December. You can find more information at citystaug.com. The National Hurricane Center is tracking a potential tropical disturbance off the coast of the Carolinas, but meteorologist Andrew Wolfeck with the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network says any potential impacts don't look to be all that great.
Forecasters began highlighting a region in the southwest Atlantic for the possibility of development over the past weekend, and it will be continued to be monitored through the week. The National Hurricane Center is giving the area a low chance of developing because conditions aren't entirely favorable. Dry air and upper-level winds will keep whatever develops off the coast of the Carolinas in check. The system will likely meander over the next week well off the coast of the southeast before it decides on its next move. The only impacts at this point appear to be from those getting into the ocean, with greater surf and an increased threat for rip currents along the Atlantic seaboard for the Independence Day weekend.
If a storm develops, the next named storm would be Bertha. But today here in Northeast Florida, heat is going to be the big weather story. A heat advisory is in place from noon until 7 this evening for all of Northeast Florida due to feels-like temperatures possibly reaching up to 109 this afternoon. Highs will be in the mid to upper 90s.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Odoo, an all-in-one business management software platform for small or large businesses with the goal of being flexible and scalable. Learn more about Odoo at odoo.com. This is NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
A first-of-its-kind study focused on the human health toll of decades of industrial pollution. Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, we talk to 2 community members about the creation of the inaugural Coast Superfund Research Center and what impact locals are having the study will have. Later in the program, 10 years of providing social purpose real estate in the heart of downtown. What the Jesse's open door policy has meant for community groups, arts organizations, and ordinary folks. But first, I'm joined by 2 community consultants working on behalf of a novel 5-year environmental research project. Anita Collins is a 6th-generation resident of Glynn County who lives in what's been dubbed a fence line community right next to a highly toxic federal Superfund site. She's been involved in this study for a number of years. Anita Collins, good morning.
Good morning. Glad to be with you this morning.
Very glad to have you. We're also joined by Josiah Watts. He's an environmental justice strategist who traces his lineage to the Gullah Geechee of Sapelo Island. He's also an original co-founder of the I Run With Maud movement for his murdered cousin, Ahmaud Arbery. Welcome to the program, Mr. Watts.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Anita, we will talk about science and the community, but if you would, can you just start by talking about life growing up? How aware of you as a young person were you of the industrial operations in this area?
So, growing up in Brunswick, I describe it as paradise. Regrettably, I did not learn that it was a poisoned paradise until I was very, very much an adult. And growing up, I lived 2 blocks from a plant that has now been closed. Growing up, it was known as Hercules. A portion of it later was renamed Panova. That was in the early aughts when that name change occurred. But growing up there, the smoke plumes were always, it was pretty constant. The smell was horrible. And I've been asked to describe the smell, and I say decayed flesh, rotten eggs, feces, sulfur combined.
Wow.
So pretty horrible. But we all knew the contradiction for us is that Hercules provided stable employment for so many households. And growing up where I did on L Street, every day you saw the workers walking to work or bicycling to work, as well as coming when they get off work, they would have their lunch pails. I was always fascinated by those lunch pails because I wanted to have one for my lunch. But anyway, we didn't know. We didn't know that when we were playing in rainwater, the puddles, we didn't realize any or have any connection with the possibility of contamination of groundwater and the soil. I remember at one time Hercules would even donate soil from their land to residents. And what did residents do? They would put it on their property for their gardens or just to build up their soil. So to learn all what was going on there, to learn about that as an adult, I was horrified, to say the least.
And you say you didn't know, and there were hundreds of people that worked at Hercules. It was an important economic engine for that area.
Huge.
Yeah, and we should say that the plant began its life as part of a production line that was creating rubber. This was back in, 1940s, essentially.
Yes.
Grinding pine stumps. So there's this huge pine industry, of course, across northern Florida, southeast Georgia.
Yes.
The stumps can be turned into rosin, which can be made into rubber. And Hercules was making paints and varnishes, and at some point began producing a pesticide called toxaphene.
Toxaphene, and that was produced for over 30 years. And the reason, toxaphene was created there, manufactured there because of the boll weevil. And many people probably now are not even aware of a boll weevil, but the boll weevil was eating and destroying cotton crops. So the farmers needed help so the cotton could grow. And as you probably know, cotton is still grown quite a bit in South Georgia. All right. So that boll weevil needed to be destroyed, and toxaphene was created in the labs there to combat that problem.
Josiah, I want to ask you about that because there is sort of this full vicious cycle in a way. We talked about the fact that you trace your descendants from Sapelo Island, the Gullah Geechee community, which is a community that remains identifiable today, but has its roots in slaves, people who were enslaved, brought over to this country, many of them from West Africa, who have maintained a community, but who were abused and mistreated and exploited, a lot of them producing cotton or harvesting cotton. And this chemical that was produced to treat these crops has then gone on to be a source of poison and problem that continues today.
Yeah, no, and I would be remiss if I didn't also add that Miss Anita is also Gullah Geechee. So we both have Gullah Geechee roots, but you're exactly right. And where that connection comes in to Sapelo is that many of my ancestors and family members worked at these plants in these places, right? Because that industry was pretty extensive and large and paid well. So you had people that, from the island that, either lived on the mainland or came from the island that worked at these plants at LCP, at Hercules, at these places that were producing, toxaphene. And there was a study that was done with 9 residents. This is outside of this current study that we did through Healthy Coastal Neighborhoods. And all of those people had elevated levels of these PCBs and toxaphene and these toxins in their bodies, and that came from them, obviously working at these places, but also because a significant part of our culture is seafood, the water, right? And so when these toxins and contaminants are also in the water, and you have people who a significant part of their culture, are our seafood ways, or our food ways, fishing, agriculture, the soil, then, there are all these different ways that these contaminants can get in our bodies. And I can't, it'd be countless for me to say. I couldn't tell you how many folks and family members that I've had that have died from cancer-related illnesses, who are fairly healthy people who, fished, didn't smoke, didn't do anything that was bad for their health, but yet, they had these related illnesses.
And when it comes to fishing, the Hercules plant in particular had a outfall for its wastewater into Terry Creek, which was a popular fishing place. And it is itself now a Superfund site, essentially one of the worst on this federally designated lists, the creek.
Yes.
Where people fish.
And is water contained? It's not. A creek feeds off into other creeks and rivers, okay? So it just spread, unfortunately. And where we live, not eating seafood is unheard of, okay?
Right.
And if you didn't fish, for example, my mom didn't fish, my grandparents fished. As a matter of fact, every week. My grandparents who lived next door would fish. So all of us grew up eating the fish, the crab, the shrimp, and unknowing. Another thing is that at Hercules, before the streets were paved, there was a ditch that ran from the Hercules plant into our community. And as children, you see a ditch, you play in it. Okay? My cousins would catch I can't even right now call the name of the little animal that my grandparents would fish with, that they would scoop up in a net from the ditches. Okay? So to learn that this beautiful place where we live and all of this contamination was happening and was made its way into our bodies, it's horrifying. And then to still be dealing with this so many years later, we are very appreciative that the Emory researchers heeded our requests for help, because those requests have been ignored for so many years. So actually, we had a community meeting last Wednesday, and one of the things that I said during the meeting was that I cannot celebrate this award. I'm glad we got funded, but I'm filled with a lot of rage, because when I think about how helpful this would have been, say 20, 30 years ago, but definitely 20 years ago, it would have been so helpful. And we may have been able to save some of our loved ones who transitioned.
If you're just joining us, we are talking to two Brunswick residents about new research that has been funded into decades-old pollution in the Brunswick community. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can reach us on air at 904-549-2937. You can go online to firstcoastconnect.org, or you can email questions or comments to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I want to ask you about how this study is different, because there has been, obviously, this is a small community, about 15,000 people. It's a majority-minority community. It's a historic community, but it is small, and there are 4 designated Superfund sites in this small community. There's more than a dozen other hazardous waste sites that are managed by the state as well. So there is an inordinate amount of pollution in a very small area. And so there's been a lot of research done. There's been a lot of remediation done. There's been a lot of people coming in to look at how a site is polluted, to look at cleaning up a site, perhaps getting it ready for the next stage of industrial use. There hasn't always been, or perhaps some would say there really has never been, a focus on the direct impact on the health of the surrounding community. And that changed essentially with this first blood test study that happened, I guess, in 2023. Yeah. You were a part of that, Anita.
Yes.
And
yes.
Tell us what that did and why that shifted the conversation, how the community helped create that study in the first place.
how it came about was to approach Emory University. And some of our community residents, as a result of a health fair, indicated that they wanted to know more. They wanted to learn whether or not there was any harm in their bodies.
Specifically wanted to know if they had been contaminated.
If they had been contaminated, exactly. And as a result of that health fair, Emory University was contacted, and a study, I don't want to say pilot, but the initial study was small because of funds. These things are expensive. And 100 residents were contacted, and there was I would say a broad swath of residents from the Brunswick, Glynn County area who were tested.
Demographically.
Yes. And so where I live, Urbana-Pear Park, that is one of the fence line communities. Goodyear is another. So it's a chain link fence that separates the residents' properties from not only Hercules, but we have Glen Avenue, which is Highway 17, which is adjacent to our neighborhood, and that's where you have the Terry Creek site. So it's as a result of residents just saying, we want to know what's going on, all right? We're losing too many people. There's too much lung cancer for people who've never smoked. There's so many folks who are on dialysis because of renal failure. Asthma, oh my gosh. I would say just about, and I don't have any stats to back this up, but if I'm in the room with 3 people, at least one of them has asthma, or a child that has asthma, because it is so more prevalent now than it was when I was a child.
And in terms of focusing on residents, Josiah, how was that different from what had been done in the past? How was that received by the community?
Yeah, I think it's been, received well, but I think you can't dismiss the mixed emotions, right? I think sometimes when people see this, they think it's this kind of new thing. Well, people have been complaining about this, about the ills of it, about, these contaminants for a very, very long time. People have always known that something was wrong, that something wasn't right. The high percentage of different, health issues that people have, just as Ms. Collins was talking about with asthma. So I think there is this kind of final validation, of saying that finally, that it is being acknowledged. But we just can't be dismissive also of I think the anger and the pain that families have had to, deal with for, generations, the loss of loved ones, the dealing with the illnesses. And that's real, and I always try to remind folks that these are real lives and real people who live every day and try to take care of their families in the best ways that they can. And yet they were subjected to these contaminants, to these toxins, to this poison by these industries that knew, right? And you can remediate and you can clean up, but you can never change that past and that history. So there has to be a truly community-driven focus of how do we, one, make sure that nothing like this happens again, but 2, figure out how we can help people so that we can mitigate, these exposures.
In terms of the historic pollution, that is one thing. We've talked about LCP chemicals, Hercules, but a portion of one of those sites went on to be redeveloped in the early aughts, as you said, to Panova. They incurred numerous violations of air quality laws. They were
numerous.
Fined hundreds of thousands of dollars. Ultimately, had a massive fire there.
Yes.
Just a couple years ago.
April 15, 2023.
It caused a shelter-in-place order. People were not allowed to go into the neighborhood. It burned for quite some time. People who are watching our live stream can see some of that footage. It was just entirely consumed. What did that feel like to have such a clear, immediate hazard on a site that has been such a historic environmental plague for the surrounding community?
So I want to bring forward a slight contrast. While all this black smoke is billowing from Hercules, there's Urbana Perry Park, there's the chain link fence, and there are the homes that's some maybe 12 inches or less from the chain link fence, and children are outside of their homes playing. The smoke is dark. The smoke is all over, but they're playing. And was that normal? No. But for them as children, it was normal. They could see the fire. They could see the smoke. It was right there, but they were outside playing. And I say that because does that mean we're numb? No, it doesn't mean it, but we just did not recognize the danger. All right? But that danger that happened as a result of that fire is what we have been living with for generations, as Mr. Watts has said, for generations. The not knowing, the questions, the thinking that something is not right, but not having any data to truly give a foundation to it, and to have the federal and state agencies come in and I would say pretty much disregard the neighbors. I don't want to get anybody in any trouble, but that's really what has happened. Disregarded the neighbors. When they present information, they present it with scientific language rather than attempting to even just be basic in communicating what is going on in terms of when the word remediation. So with that fire, there were numerous residents who had to seek medical attention at the ER or a day or two later with their personal physician because of breathing. The odor that remained in the community was horrible. It lingered in my house for over 5 days. All right. The firefighters, when they arrived at Panova, didn't have the proper equipment to extinguish the fire.
They couldn't go in and try to fight it because they weren't equipped to do it.
They were not prepared. They used water. Water did not help. So they had to regroup. So our community, our public officials were unprepared.
What does it mean, Josiah, to have the focus on the community when it has been so long, this data set that's been produced to tell you how the site is doing, to switch the focus to kind of how the humans are doing?
That's right. I mean, it's long overdue, right? In situations like this, we know that there's papers published and researchers are doing studies and all these different things. And maybe some of those things are helpful, but all the while that this is going on, they're the people, right? The people are dealing with medical conditions. The people have to think about, how much they fish, what kinds of foods they eat. The people have to think about the fact that you have this industry that's sitting right next door to you that just had a massive fire and explosion. Or the people have to think about, these plants that constantly had violations, right? That sometimes that we weren't aware of, but they just paid the fine.
Probably most of the time, right?
Right.
So does having this, you participated in the study, Anita. It was initially 100 people. They found very high levels of certain chemicals, just happened to be the chemicals that were produced on these sites,
Right.
specific to these sites.
Right.
So it is a validation, as you say, in some ways, of the concerns that people have had. Now this study is greatly expanded.
Yes.
There's a considerable amount of funding that's coming from the federal government. It is now going to be extended to a 5-year study. More
Yes.
people will be able to get tested, but there's other elements.
There are several elements of the testing. So the focus from a health perspective is to determine metabolic diseases, okay? And when we're talking about, for example, renal failure, hypertension, all right, high cholesterol,
Diabetes.
Diabetes, yes. So to find someone in the community that does not have one or all of those is almost impossible. And that's sad, okay? I mean, it's just so common. And I couldn't understand, why do we have so many renal failure clinics where people have to go 3 times a week for dialysis, okay? And then I started doing some homework and realized what is the contributing factor for renal failure, all right? And it is very alarming, the numbers that are having to live with this chronic condition, okay? So my eyes have been opened, because as a child I was so ignorant to how much harm was being done from an environmental perspective. And now helping our neighbors to be more aware, because when you would go for your physical exams or your follow-ups, everything can be dismissed as, well, your mom had it or your grandmother had it. Well, what about those who have no correlation? And if your mother or your father or your grandparents, if they lived in this community, their diet was the same as your diet. Okay, so this study is looking at this. We'll look at the seafood that is consumed, and see how much that contributes, as well as there will be some soil sampling, soil testing, and responding to disasters. And I just went blank on the terminology, but that is also a component of it. So there are 5 major components of this, of how the funding will be used over 5 years to bring answers.
Interestingly, one of the things that you raised earlier was flooding. They're going to be looking at...
That's one of the components, because flooding is so prevalent that we don't even use the term correctly. And what I mean by that, that happens all the time. We just overlook it somewhat, but not recognizing that's flooding. That's not what should be happening. Yes, we are adjacent, our community is adjacent to the marsh. However, flooding is a problem, okay? And raising that awareness through more information and disseminating more information and education to our neighbors is crucial.
It's interesting, our colleagues over at the Florida Trib did some reporting just last week about flooding near Superfund sites, how that impacts communities of color particularly. And this is a pretty good example. I mean, as we said, Brunswick, the size of the community there is about the size of St. Augustine. And to have more Superfund sites than any other city in Georgia is a really disproportionate risk for people who live there. Josiah, what is it that you are hoping this study brings? And what would you like people to know about the fact that it's now getting underway?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that this study can, one, bring about answers for all of us. There's still a lot of questions. I hope it can bring about methods of how people can, limit, exposure. But I also hope it brings about a certain level of humanity and reminder for all of us the connection that we have to one another, that, these contaminants and toxins will impact whoever is near them. And it connects to all of us in some way, form, or fashion. And so it is imperative for everyone, whether they live near these sites or whether they worked at these factories or not, that we not only support this study, but we support this community, that we support, these people and these families, and a lot of folks who have been, for years, have been trying to bring attention to this. So I think, for me, for people to just have a realization and an understanding that there are people that are working hard every day in their lives, in their community, their culture, and they love their families too, but they also have to deal with this. And how do we find ways to support one another, not only with this study, but also those, the frontline communities like Urbana, Perry Park, and Goodyear as well, and others that are impacted.
Anita, I'm going to ask you, because we've gotten a couple of questions. One asking about, what did the EPA do? What did the state of Georgia do? What was their response? But another email saying this is part of a larger pattern of the GOP, the Republican Party, enabling corporations to externalize costs back onto society so they can make more money. Because of the way it happens, it's very difficult for communities to control for it. So the discussion is important, but give it the name so people can understand the larger pattern. I'd just like you to address those comments.
We all know that the elephant that is always in the room is systemic racism. And I know the term that is used a lot in the media or in common conversations is about poverty in our communities. And I use the term marginalized. And I use that term because of systemic racism. Our communities are marginalized in terms of resources, and the EPA and the EPD has failed us. Has failed us. Because even though there were many fines that were levied upon Hercules and these other sites, sometimes they were paid and sometimes they were not paid. All right. And the sanctions that were imposed upon them, the polluters ignored. And there's a consistent track record of that. The data, the information that's out there demonstrates that. All right. So regrettably, this can happen in any community within this country. And it has happened. There's a huge problem right now in North Georgia, in the Dalton area, from the carpet industry, how the waters have been damaged by these huge companies.
The
Okay?
forever chemicals.
These forever chemicals. And just the word forever. That is a term that it just penetrates the core, because you know that until you die, these will remain in your body.
Well, it is a story, obviously, that's going to have a very long shelf life. I appreciate you
Yes.
both coming down today from Brunswick
Thank
to
you.
talk about it.
Thank you. We appreciate the invite.
Yeah, no, thank you very much.
All right. We hope to have you back sometime. Up next, the Jessie, celebrating 10 years downtown. Welcome back. For the past 10 years, the Jessie Ball DuPont Center, known as the Jessie, has opened its doors to nonprofits, arts organizations, community events, and just ordinary passerby. They call it part of their mission to provide social purpose real estate in the heart of downtown. Here to tell us about a decade at work is Mari Kuraishi. She's president of the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund. Mari, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you. So the building itself is home to the Jessie. It's a place a lot of people will be familiar with because of its iconic look. And I want to ask you about it because being in that location is really central to the Jessie's identity, to its appeal. And it is not at all a foregone conclusion that that building remains standing. Tell us a little bit about the building that you live in.
Absolutely. So the building was designed in 1965 by Taylor Hardwick, one of the sort of preeminent mid-century architects in our area at the time. And it's got this amazing, iconic look of fins and Italian tile. Was for a long time the main library of Jacksonville. It eventually became too small to be the main library. And when the library vacated, it stayed empty for a number of years until the trustees and then president of the Jessie Ball DuPont Fund said, wait, it's about to be demolished. We're going to have to go in there and do something. And of course, this was brand new to the fund. We weren't real estate people. And they're like, are you sure? I don't know. And, eventually they came up with this vision of creating first-class office space for nonprofits downtown and preserving that building with its iconic look.
We were talking a little bit before the show. I mean, I remember well doing research at that old Hayden Burns library. I spent a lot of time in the basement, less so in the upper echelons of that beautiful building, but it is so iconic. It's hard to believe that we were as close as we were to tearing it down, and what a travesty that would have been. But preserving it, I would imagine, is a very gratifying piece of the Jessie's legacy at this point.
Absolutely. It took 3 years of work to rehab, essentially, and conserve the building. And I think it's clearly a labor of love, but it is so important in, the downtown at the time when the fund decided to do this. Downtown was sort of in decline, and there weren't very many adaptive reuse projects happening. So when the fund came in and took that step, it sort of showed that it could be done, which was really important, and eventually I think led to things like the Barnett Building and other things that are underway today. And as we grow, as the city evolves, it's sometimes important to maintain certain anchors in the community that remind people about the past to sort of create a jumping off point for the future.
Sure, especially in a city where some might say that the examples of this truly out there architecture are limited. I mean, there's some great architecture, but in terms of things that are truly
distinctive
and so experimental,
Yeah.
as this was when it was built, the outside is also part of the Jessie's definition of itself. There's these beautiful mosaics that feature some of the local African American leaders of this area, particularly Janetta Besh Cole, Rodney Hurst, Zora Neale Hurston, who of course had claim to Jacksonville for a while, Rutledge Pearson, Ebony Payne. So these iconic figures of Jacksonville, in some ways, the history of the fund itself, there's so much philanthropy that it's done, but it's named after somebody who had a bit of a troubled history when it came to race. Jessie Ball DuPont, an avowed segregationist. And so there has been, I think, an effort to sort of reconnect that name with a more progressive, more inclusive approach to.
Yeah, and it's her life is a reminder that we're all complicated, right? She's an incredibly generous woman, dedicated to philanthropy long before she actually became wealthy, and at the same time had these views that we can't support today. And it sort of is at this tension is at the center of our identity. We seek to sort of maintain and enhance her legacy of generosity, and her love of place. She loved Jacksonville, loved the northern neck where she was born, and Delaware where she lived with Alfred, and to create from that love a vision of a creative, generative, inclusive future.
Yeah. The Jesse is a neat space. I mean, it's a beautiful space, obviously, and home to many nonprofits. It hosts a lot of events. People have weddings there. People have launches there of
Yeah.
new initiatives, city debates, all kinds of things happen there. But it's also a place, in my experience, where people can go in and use the restroom if they need to. It is something that really tries to uphold an idea of being part of downtown, the fabric of downtown. And I'm curious just what the 10-year mark means in terms of going forward. Is that mission, is that vision changing? And what do you think you've added in that period to how people experience the city?
Yeah. So, when it was rehabbed and we had done all the work to create it, we're like, oh, we got to get tenants. It's got to be like 100% subscribed, otherwise, how do we keep this going? Right. And so occupancy is something we pay attention to, like any other office building. And yet we didn't want to be just another office building downtown. We wanted it to be, as you said, a place where anyone can walk in and, take a breather from the heat and go use the bathrooms and have conversations in the atrium. And as we approach the 10-year mark, internally for us, it is really important to ensure that this is a sustainable model of because we want the Jesse to be there in the long term. It can't be something that a foundation sort of pours a lot of money into and keeps pouring money into. It's got to be something that the community wants and demonstrates by using it in the ways what we want it to be used, as something that the community wants for long term as well.
And where are you on that continuum right now in terms of being sustainable? Have you reached that?
We have reached operational sustainability, so and have done so for quite a long time. And I think as the challenge is that we live in a hurricane prone area, there's extreme weather events. Capital costs have to be carefully factored into the business model so that we are ready if we need to replace a roof or a chiller or whatever, happens. So those are things that we are working on to ensure that we are here long term.
I have kind of a political question on email about whether your groups their political affiliation contributes to whether they can use that space, asking specifically about pro-Palestinian groups. And whether that has played into people being able to use that space.
We want to make sure that the Jesse is a place where everyone feels comfortable showing up. We don't necessarily, think of it as a place that is exclusive to one point of view. We want to ensure that there's a diversity of views that are represented, but we do want to keep the place safe. And so we want to make sure that it isn't, become sort of a flashpoint of protest.
It must be a difficult vetting process.
Yeah, we try to be thoughtful about it, and we try to be very even-handed about it as much as possible.
And so personally, how are you celebrating this moment in time, this 10-year mark?
Well, we've, had a bunch of small events inside the Jesse as well as outside the Jesse. There's a montage that shows various points in time of the Jesse that's sort of on permanent roll in the on the big screen downstairs, and we're also coming up on the Jesse Paul DuPont Fund's 50th anniversary,
Wow.
starting at the end of this year, going into next year. So it's sort of seamlessly going to segue into the Fund's 50th anniversary. So the Jesse's 10th and the Fund's 50th.
Just very briefly, any big changes that you are bracing for?
Not that we can see, but things happen in the world, right?
Yeah.
And we have to react to them.
Yeah. Well, it's great to see you again. It's very nice to talk to you. Mari Kuraishi, she is president of the Jesse Ball DuPont Fund. Mari, thanks so much for coming on today.
Absolutely.
All right. Coming up next, we're going to talk to a pair of longtime artists about crafting and creating their own supply swap store.
Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. When people are hurt through no fault of their own, finding the who, what, when, where, why, and how that led to the accident is critical to proving the truth.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com. United Way of Northeast Florida connects people, resources, and ideas to help solve local needs. Serving the region since 1924, United Way works with donors and volunteers to help local families thrive. More information at unitedwaynefl.org.
On the next Fresh Air, Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova. They were tennis champions, the two biggest stars of their generation. They were friends, they were rivals, and after retiring, they got cancer at the same time. Now they're the subject of a new Netflix documentary. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
The road trip feels almost as American as apple pie.
America is created by travel. From the first pilgrims who arrive on the Mayflower and then start spreading out west, we've never stopped traveling.
But the history of traveling the country is both richer and more complicated than it may seem. I'm Emory Sievertson. Get in, we're going on a road trip. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
The presidential pardon is one of the broadest powers in the Constitution. Since returning to office, President Trump has granted clemency to over 1,700 people, including convicted January 6th insurrectionists and a range of others that critics say push the boundaries of how that power is meant to be used. Next time on 1A, we ask what the presidential pardon power is actually for.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. After the closure of Jacksonville's oldest art supply store, Ready Arts, in 2025, two longtime crafters wanted a new space where local creatives could shop and swap sustainably. Here to tell us about it, we're joined by the founders of Art Cart Jacks, Jessica Grist. Good morning, Jessica.
Good morning.
And Blake Riley. Hi, Blake.
Hi.
So we were talking a little bit before the show about the closure of Ready Arts. That really was a huge center of the arts community in Jacksonville, in San Marco, and its closure created a real vacuum, I guess, in your mind. So how did Art Cart come about as a remedy of sorts to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we really were sad to hear about Ready Arts, and also Joann's was closing around the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So those were both huge losses. And so we just decided to kind of, after also talking about so many craft supplies kind of going to waste or sitting in closets and going to landfill, if we could kind of become a resource for the community and encourage people to come do free pop-up swaps. And so we just kind of decided to go for it, and we ended up getting a really good response, and everyone's been really excited.
So these started as pop-ups. What do they offer? Like when people come, what is available? What do you ask of them?
So we typically try to bring a variety of different crafts supplies that have been donated to us. So we might have a little bit of like painting, yarn for fiber art, just anything that's been donated to us. And then we ask people donate something if they can in return, but really no one's ever been turned away. We haven't had a problem with people taking too much or anything like that. So it's really just a space to come and see what we have, something that inspires you, and make something in the process.
And so are people coming and just plopping down and getting to work, or are they taking the crafts and going home? What's the arrangement?
Both. Yeah. So now that we have the Mart, which is open, we have a space for people to come and hang. And also at our regular pop-ups, they're at local establishments like coffee shops and bookstores, and Eco Relics is one of them as well. We have tables for people to come and stay. And we've had a good number of people come and hang out with us and, make friends. And So it's a really good, creative, and encouraging environment.
It's a cool concept. I think a lot of times people go to like an art store or an art or a gallery or whatever. They kind of get inspired, but there's this gap between that moment and the moment of creation, sometimes enough to sort of prevent people from actually sitting down and getting to work. You kind of solve that by giving them the space and the immediacy.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of to piggyback off of your first question, there really weren't a lot of craft stores after Ready Arts in our side of town, like in our neighborhood. And I feel like Riverside, Murray Hill, like basically anything around downtown is such a creative like hub of people, and those people need the resource to find those materials. So being able to pop up at different arts markets too, where typically, you know, people who enjoy and appreciate creative art are already there. So it gives them a just barrier-free way to get that stuff.
And so the Mart is at Margaret Street. It's, I guess, every Sunday now. And so how does having that sort of more permanent location as opposed to just an occasional pop-up change how you hope the community receives you or finds you?
Yeah, I think it has really just helped give people a consistent place, a reliable place. You know, before you'd have to keep up with our Instagram to know when we're doing pop-ups and that sort of thing. And so we've already honestly gotten more donations because we have a permanent space. They're leaving them on the porch for us. And so it's really increased our traffic and the people coming to find us and know about us.
Tell us about what you're looking for in terms of supplies. I know that everybody's got, you know, a drawer full of old pens. That's probably not exactly high on your list, but what would be helpful? What do you want people to know that you're looking for?
That's a great point. I would say we are not very picky about what we take. The main things that we try to stay away from, just because we don't have that much room to store them, are things like school supplies and office supplies, and then like house paint, spray paint, things like that. Anything else, if it's a creative hobby that you have, we'll take it, and we can always sort through it and see what's usable, what's not, and get it into the right hands.
And both of you work in interior design, and so this space is also very artfully designed, very beautiful, and your Instagram presence is really cool. But you sort of take like with like and you group it together, and so people are able to find what they're looking for.
Like a typical craft store. Yeah, we try to group everything, make it easy.
All right. And so if people are interested in coming, I mean, who is welcome? Who should be thinking about going?
Anybody, anyone that is thinking about creative, even if you've never done any art at all, if you're a professional artist, anything in between. We want it to be easy for everybody and remind people that there's no bad way to make art, which is Community Art Studio says that all the time.
Yeah.
And so, we just want everybody to come and create.
Yeah, we say no skill required. We try to make the activities that we do put on very approachable and accessible so that people don't feel a sense of like, you know, I have to be good at this to enjoy it, because it is for everybody. Yeah. And I think even if you aren't technically skilled, it still benefits you.
Yeah. All right. Well, Jessica Grist, Blake Riley, thanks for doing it. It's the Mart. It opened at Margaret Street Studios on June 21st, and it's open there Sundays now, 12 to 5 at 1732 Margaret Street. Thanks, you guys, for coming on today.
Thank you so much.
All right. And thank you for listening. We appreciate it. First Coast Connect is produced by Stacey Bennett. Our associate producer is Isabella Casapow. Our show is directed by Brady Corum, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us tomorrow when we talk about what's next at Cumberland Island National Seashore as the feds look at swapping some land for private development. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. United Way of Northeast Florida connects people, resources, and ideas to help solve local needs. Serving the region since 1924, United Way works with donors and volunteers to help local families thrive. More information at unitedwaynefl.org.